Hi, my name's Kim. Welcome to my workshop. I'd like to teach you about cigar box guitar, this instrument. If you're an absolute beginner, it's sometimes a bit hard to find some information that helps you because people assume that you know a bit about it. So this is a 3-stringed cigar box guitar. It's tuned G, D, G. And it's slightly different from a 6-string guitar. This makes it easier to play because the chord shapes are easier. You don't need to learn such complicated chord patterns, and it's quite a lot of fun to play. Right, the first thing you need to know is that this guitar has 3 strings only, but you can have 4-string cigar box guitars. This guitar is tuned G, D, G, but you can have other open tuning. Particularly if you have 4-string guitar, you have a lot more options of what kind of tuning you can have. But common tunings that other people might choose for a 3-string guitar are D, A, D and E, B, E. You'll notice that in all these open tunings, the top string, the highest string and the bass string or the bottom string, which actually is at the top when you're actually playing. It's a bit confusing. So I say bottom string, meaning the lowest sounding string. Some people call that the top string. It gets a bit confusing. But the bass string and the top string are the same note. They're just an octave apart. And I can actually show you, if I stand up, I'll show you what I'm actually playing. So here, if I strum, I'm playing the bottom string, middle string, top string. Okay? So that's the strings on the guitar. Now the strings pass over something called the neck, and the neck has these wires on it called fret wires, and these mark the distance between a fret. So the fret is the gap between the fret wires. Some of the frets you'll notice have dots on them. That's to help me find my way up and down the guitar neck. 2 dots at the 12th fret, and that is actually the octave. So if I press here, that's the top string G, and then if I put my finger on the 12th fret of the bottom string, it's not quite in tune, is it? But okay, it does show you that it's the same note. Right, talking about tuning, let's show you how to tune the guitar. If you haven't got an electronic tuner, you can just tune everything to the bottom string. So let's try that. So if I play the bottom string, that's my G note. Now if I press on the 7th fret, then that is the D note, and I can tune it to itself. And then if I want to play the top string note on this string here, on the middle string, that is a D. So I go D, E, F sharp, G on the 5th fret. And you can see that's the one that's not quite in tune. Right, I'm going to try it with an electronic tuner. This is my Snark tuner. I'll just turn it on. And you can see that it actually needs to, if I do that, it doesn't make a difference on the display at all. You actually have to clip it onto the neck. So it's going to be a bit hard for me to show you what's actually happening and for me to see at the same time. But if I just get this guitar in tune, I'm going for a blue note on this Snark one. You'll see that mine one has red if it's too low, as in it's flat, green if it's too high, as in it's sharp, and blue if it's the correct note. Well, it seems a bit weird to me that green isn't the correct note, but there we go. So G, D, a little bit sharp, let's go down a little bit, and G, a little bit sharp again, there we go. Okay, so we've talked about the fact that this has 3 strings, a neck, frets and fret wire. Up here, this is called the headstock, and the headstock has got 3 tuning pegs, or we call these machine heads, on there. These are the things that you turn to make the strings get tighter or looser, and that's what tunes the guitar string. This bit of white across here is actually called the nut, and that's where the strings pass over the nut. Can you see? Pass over, and that's where the note starts from as such. So the string here, back here, is not part of the tuning. This bit is. Right at the bottom we have another piece of white. This is either bone or plastic often, sometimes it's metal, and you can see that down here, these bits, they're not part of the whole string tuning. You have to be this side. So the distance between the bridge and the nut is an important length, because that's called the scale length. And you can have guitars that have much longer scale lengths. That will mean that the neck is longer, and so the frets are wider apart. A short scaled guitar will tend to have a shorter neck and smaller gaps between the frets, but that's not always the case, because you have to take into account the size of the box, because the box is part of the length of the scale. It's not just the neck length. So when we say long scale length, we don't necessarily mean longer neck length. That's an important distinction. Anyway, let's have a go at playing something. So the great thing about cigar box guitar is that it's tuned in open G. So just literally strumming those strings plays a chord. Now you can either use your fingernail, I tend to use that fingernail flicking down like that, or your thumbnail going down like that, or I normally like to use a pick or a plectrum. I seem to have lost the one I was using just earlier, but I've got my little bag here with several in. You can choose all kinds of plectrums. I like to use quite a thin one, and I prefer the teardrop shape. But you can go for slightly bigger ones if you fancy something bigger. Right, so I'm going to play with a pick now. So just with no finger on the fretting hand, no frets being pressed down, I'm just literally strumming away. Now when you're very first starting out, strumming is quite difficult. So don't worry if you can't play a nice strumming rhythm like that as you very first start. That will come as you practice. Just practice going down. Try to keep a steady beat. When you're good at going down, on these down strokes as we call them, try coming up. So play the top string first. Then when you're good at doing that, try doing down and up. And then you'll eventually get to where you can actually play a strumming pattern. And that's normally caused by missing out some of the down and up strokes, a bit like this. One of the great things about open tuning like this is that because you can play a chord with no finger on the fretting hand, you can actually use your finger to slide up, cover all these frets, and play lots and lots of different chords. So this is a G chord with no frets pressed down. If you come up onto the first fret, that's actually a G sharp chord. So it goes G, G sharp, A sharp, or we call that B flat as well, B, and then we get to C. Now that's the chord that I really wanted to teach you, because G and C go together. Have a listen. And there's one more chord that we're going to learn in just a second, but first of all I want to talk to you about how to get a good fretting action. You'll notice that on your finger you've got these little gaps where the finger joint is. You want to make sure that those aren't pressing down across where the strings go through, because that will make a buzzing sound. When you press on the fretboard, you need to press fairly firmly, don't hurt yourself, but you also need to make sure that you're pressed just behind that fret wire. If you see, I'm not back here, I'm just behind that fret wire, not on top of it, just behind there. Now you need to say, as I say, you need to press fairly firmly. So just practice along with me now. I'm going to play a few Gs and then I'll tell you when we're going to change to the C chord. And remember, we're on the 5th fret. And we're going to C and back to G and back to C. Now you may have noticed that I've got a dot here right on the C chord. That really helps me to play, so it's the 5th fret and it helps me to know exactly where that C chord is. Now the next dot up, as you can see, is on the 7th fret, and that is a chord that's going to help us to play a D chord. Now G, C and D all go together, and if you could learn these 3 chords, you'd be able to play hundreds if not thousands of tunes. So let's have a little go at playing that D chord. So press on the 7th fret just behind the wire, back to the C, and back to G, which is open. So now we've got 3 chords that we can play: G chord, C chord and D chord. And in the next lesson I'll show you how just using those 3 chords you can learn to play something called the 12-bar blues. Thank you for joining me for this first beginner lesson. I hope you've learnt a few things and you realise how much fun you can have playing the cigar box guitar. Join me next time for some more tips. Bye for now.